Regarding why our school board believes it's very important to run a supplemental levy election. So if you look at the screen, you'll see we're going to be looking at facts and information about why we need a supplemental levy. And we have three main goals: to keep programs and qualified teachers in place, student safety, and we need to replace obsolete textbooks. I had one student say to me just the other day that some of the textbooks at the high school are older than she is, and she's about to graduate. Tells you something. So our levy election, our M&O election, is on May 21st. And the first thing that I want to do is that this is pretty illustrative. This will show you all the things that we have been asked to do in the public school system over the last 100 years.
Driver's education.
Business education.
Organized athletics.
Domestic science.
Immunizations.
Industrial
Vision
arts.
screenings.
Art and music.
This is the story about America
Programs.
and America's public schools.
Computer
Specifically, it's about how we, as a society, have changed what we ask our public
science, global
schools to do.
education.
Once upon a time, the mandate was simple. Help us teach our children what they need to know. Not anymore. My name is Jamie Vollmer. I speak and write about public education, and I contend that this story is important. Our response will determine everyone's future, whether or not we have children in school. For the first time in our history, social and economic conditions demand that we unfold the full potential of every child. This goal has never been achieved anywhere in the world, and the only way that we can succeed is by working together to remove the obstacles of student success, both in and out of school. But instead of accepting a shared community-wide responsibility for student success, we act as though our teachers and administrators can and should do it alone. Every year we add to the mountain of academic, social, psychological, and medical responsibilities that we've heaped upon our schools. Every year the burden grows. This is a story of the creation of this burden, and it starts a long time ago. America's first public schools were established in the mid-1700s. Most were small, rural, and locally controlled. They were designed to teach young people, originally white boys, basic reading, writing, and arithmetic, while transmitting American culture. Over time, lessons in civics, history, geography, and science were added, but the curriculum was limited for 150 years. By the beginning of the 20th century, however, waves of immigration and changed attitudes about educating both girls and minorities brought many more children into the classroom. America's leaders saw public schools as a logical place to select and sort young people for life in the industrial age. It was at this time that we began to shift non-academic duties to the schools. The trend has accelerated ever since. From 1900 to 1910, the new responsibilities were mainly related to student health. We added lessons in basic hygiene, nutrition. Schools began to give immunizations, and we screened for vision, hearing, and dental problems. From 1910 to 1940, child labor laws swept the nation. The multiple choice test was created, and we saw the first wave of standardized tests. We also began tracking students, and to this end, we added vocational education, including the industrial arts, and agricultural education, domestic science, including sewing and cooking. Phys ed was expanded, including a growing roster of team sports, and school transportation was mandated. For decades, kids had to get to school on their own. Now we had to go fetch them. In the 1940s, a decade overshadowed by a horrific war and a remarkable recovery, we added business education. Music and art classes were expanded. Speech, including drama, became a separate academic subject. Half-day kindergartens were first introduced, and school lunch programs appeared. We take this for granted today, but it was a huge step to shift to the schools the responsibility of feeding America's children 1/3 of their daily meals. In the 1950s, the student population exploded as the first baby boomers poured into the schools. The Supreme Court struck down school segregation. The Soviets launched Sputnik. Panic ensued. And in response, science and math education were greatly expanded. Foreign language requirements were strengthened. Fire and tornado drills became compulsory. Driver's education was offered to the delight of parents everywhere. And sex education was introduced. Sometimes I wonder how we made it as a species prior to the 50s. In the 1960s, the pace of change accelerated. We saw new waves of standardized testing, and Congress made its first regulatory push into public education by passing Title I of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which introduced Head Start and bilingual education. The College Board offered advanced placement programs. We added adult education, courses in career education, and programs in recreation education, and of course, peace studies. God bless those 60s. In the 1970s, the breakup of the American family accelerated. Vietnam came to a close, Watergate changed American politics forever, and we added drug and alcohol abuse education, parenting education. African American studies introduced students to the contributions of black leaders, including Frederick Douglass, Dr. King, and Harriet Tubman. Women's studies spread from college to high school curriculums. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of free speech rights for students. And Title IX expanded athletic programs for girls, nearly doubling the cost of sports. Special education was mandated by the feds. We added talented and gifted programs, alternative education, and character education. Environmental education was first taught, and school breakfast programs appeared. Now schools must feed their students 2/3 of their daily meals, and for many, it's the only nutritious food they get. In the 1980s, the floodgates blew open as global competition began to change the U.S. economy, forcing millions of women to enter the workforce. There's a huge new wave of standardized testing. New technologies began to appear in the schools, and we added keyboarding and computer education, sexual abuse prevention education, stranger danger education, anti-smoking education, teen pregnancy awareness, abstinence education, global education, multicultural, non-sexist education, Hispanic heritage education. We added preschool programs for children at risk, full-day kindergartens, after-school programs for children of working parents, Jump Start, Early Start, Even Start, Prime Start, and child abuse monitoring became a legal requirement for all teachers. In the 1990s, the school reform movement shifted into high gear, and it collided with the spread of technology. Whiteboards began to replace chalkboards. The World Wide Web was born. Generation X was replaced by Generation Y, and we added computer labs and internet education, tech prep and school-to-work programs, distance learning, homeless education and its effects on children, HIV/AIDS education, death education. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act was passed, which greatly expanded the scope of special education for children with disabilities. America 2000 initiatives produced a wave of red tape and testing. 4 years later, Goals 2000 initiatives unleashed more red tape and testing. We saw new programs in bicycle safety, gun safety, water safety. We added conflict resolution, annual sessions of CPR training. We strengthened dropout prevention, instituted gang intervention programs, and as a result of isolated but horrific acts of violence, we saw an unprecedented effort to ensure school security. And finally, in the first decade of the 21st century, driven by the pressures of a rapidly changing society, particularly those posed by an increasingly literate global workforce, we have added No Child Left Behind, bullying prevention, elevator and escalator safety instruction, obesity monitoring for all students, counseling for kids with eating disorders, courses on organ donor awareness, steroid abuse, media literacy, personal finance, internet safety, health and wellness, race to the top, and STEM programs. And we've not added a single minute to the school calendar in 6 decades. Look at this list. Look at what we've done. For all the talk we hear about test scores, accountability, merit pay, competition, and choice, for all the criticism leveled at our public schools, no one acknowledges that the contract between our society and our schools has changed. It's no longer help us teach our children, it's raise our kids. No generation of teachers and administrators in the history of the world has had to fulfill this mandate. And each year, the burden grows. We bombard our schools with new responsibilities. We insist that they compensate for society's failures and neglect. All the while, we demand that they meet rising academic expectations. The truth is, social and economic conditions demand that we unfold the full potential of every child. Our futures are tied to their success as never before, whether or not we have children in school. But this is a job for all of us. We must all come together and help our schools remove the obstacles to student success. Because if there's only one thing I've learned in 20 years of working towards this goal, it's this: our schools cannot do it alone. They need our help. They need our understanding and support to produce the graduates and the citizens we need.
Okay, I don't think anyone would disagree that those are all good things. The video was a positive thing and something that helps us and be better citizens in our lives, but it does need funding. And so the next thing that I wanted to demonstrate to you is what has happened to our funding here in this district and across Idaho, but in this district specifically over the last 5 years, or since 2007. So what I'd like for you guys to do is get out your yellow sheet. And while you're getting that out, we have lost $1.689 million since 2007. $1.3 million have been in staffing alone. And a summary of reductions. So first, this on the screen, this is a summary. We have taken reductions, staffing reductions, attrition, program reductions, supplies and equipment, just across the board, slashed for a long time. This is a more, if you look at your yellow sheet now, this are the multi-year history of general fund budget reductions. This shows you exactly where those reductions have been made since 2007, and with a dollar amount. So you'll see in administration, we've lost over $211,000. In teachers, we've lost $792,000. In our teachers' assistants that our students work with, we've lost $127,000. In custodians, food service workers, we cut our SRO, our student resource office position. Drivers, we've lost $225,000. And then the other category in here is just everything that we have reduced since 2007 that amounts to about $236,000, too numerous to even mention. If we look at athletics and activities, we've reduced by over $30,000. And 1 year, if some of you may remember, we had to furlough 6 days of student time in the schools. And we recouped about $65,000 that way, and that was one of the main ways we were able to get through that year. So that adds up to $1.689 million, and once again, $1.3 million in staffing reductions. So we've looked at our reductions. Now I want to show you why we've had to make those reductions. So what you want to do is you want to look at this sheet right here. This shows you exactly what's been happening. Okay, so if you look at the total, the first total state base, if you look right here, you'll see that in 2006, 2007, we had over $3 million of revenue that came from the State Department. This last year, we had $2.2 million. That represents a lot that's been cut. If you look at total state revenue, back in 06, 07, we had over $3 million that came in through salary apportionment, the things that we have to pay for staff and programs, and and athletics and all the things that we like here in schools. If you look over to this year, we got $2.2 million. Now, one thing I want to point out, you know, the second to the bottom, second to the last line category is impact aid. Now, a lot of people have questions about what impact aid is. Because we are a public school on reservation land, we don't receive the property tax that Coeur d'Alene, for example, or St. Mary's or Potlatch would get. Because a lot of the taxes have been taken off the rolls. So since the 1950s, the federal government has considered it an obligation to both public schools and military base, or public schools on military bases, to help reinstitute some of that money anyway through federal funding. They took it off. They felt like they needed to make sure that we stayed in business. Okay, so that explains impact aid a little bit. So if you look at 2006, 2007, 05, 06, we got a high that year of $1.298 million, over $1.2 million from the federal government, which constituted about, probably at that time, about 20% of our budget. Okay, if you look over to this last year, we received $817,000, and last year was the year that we had to cut 5 staff members, and that was because we received a lot less impact aid money from the federal government. Okay, so if we look at total state and impact aid money, we see that we, in 2006, 2007, we had a high of $4.3 million, and this year we received 3.0, or just a little over $3 million. This is just to demonstrate we're getting a lot less money from the federal government. We're getting a lot less money from the state government because of the economy, because of shifting priorities, and also because of what we all know now is the sequestration. And that's cutting another 5% off of our everything that we get from the federal government. Okay, so, and incidentally, for those watching by tape, you can download this information and look at it specifically as well. Okay. So let's go on from there. So what have we done? How have we tried, even despite all that funding revenue that was lost, how have we tried to keep teachers' jobs in place and school lunch programs going to kids that are healthy and nutritious? How are we keeping everything going? Well, for a while, there was federal stimulus money. So for a couple of years, we were able to save some jobs through the stimulus money. As everyone knows, that's gone. There was also, came in the jobs bill. We saved 3 jobs through that. That's gone. We had an $826,000 3-year school improvement grant, and that was through the federal government. That expires this year. There's no carryover, and there's no replacement for that federal funding. We are actively seeking any grant that we possibly can, and that includes, there are some very small state grants available. For example, SchoolNet is about $10,000, but we're going for as much of that as we possibly can. And I am personally actively seeking grants. I've been working with 2 grant writers to look and, trying to save staff as much as possible through something that wouldn't cost the community anything. Haven't been real successful with staff. There doesn't seem to be too much out there that helps save the classroom teacher to teach your students. But it appears that there's some grants coming up to help us with maybe a student resource officer, which we're actively pursuing, supplies and equipment, facilities and maintenance. Okay, despite all of this gloom and doom and what we've gone through in the last several years, our progress as a whole district has gotten higher than ever. We now have an 84% graduation rate. Now, if you don't understand graduation rate, which many of us don't, because it can be different from state to state, but overall, our nation's graduation rate is about 66%. 10 years ago, our Plummer Worley School District graduation rate was 34%. Our graduation rate is now 84%. We're very proud of that. And that's an accomplishment not just for the high school. That means that we're doing things right from kindergarten to primary to intermediate to middle school and into secondary. We're experiencing a steady increase in testing scores. We currently for this year have a 3- and 4-star school, and we have higher expectations for next year. We have students that are participating in many dual enrollment activities so that they can get college credit while they're going to school here, which helps them go on to college. And 23 of our 32 seniors from last year are employed or productively going on with their lives. We're real proud of that, and our students are proud as well. So how do students feel? Every year we do a survey, and this survey comes through the Center for Educational Effectiveness. And this year at the secondary level, that's the middle school and high school level, we found out that most feel that their teachers believe student learning is important. Most students believe their teachers have high expectations for them. Most of our students at the secondary level feel challenged by lessons and activities, and most feel staff know and care for them. Okay, so getting back to budget. We're facing another shortfall for next year. The most optimistic projection for next year is $378,000 in the red. Why would we have that? Why are we projecting another shortfall? Because of decreased funding from state and federal sources, less impact aid, federal sequestration. And I also have to add that if you recall the video that you watched a little while ago, there are more and more expectations on the school district, and those expectations all come with a dollar sign. So what we're asking for is we're asking our public to vote on a supplemental levy of $550,000 per year for 2 years. In Idaho, you can only run a supplemental levy and ask for 2 years. So what would a levy pay for? It would pay to keep our teachers in the classroom. It would keep our existing staff and services. We'd be able to keep full-time kindergarten. We'd have courses students would need to graduate. We would be able to replace obsolete school safety equipment and obsolete textbooks at the secondary level. In other words, we're not asking to go back to 2007, 2008 funding level and have all that we used to have. All we're asking is the ability to offer a more comprehensive education program for our students so they can be successful in their lives. Currently, people who own property in our district pay $1.49 per $1,000 of assessed value. That's because of the new elementary school building and because of a tax called tort, which just pays for some liability stuff that is, every school district has a tort tax. Okay, so if we had a supplemental levy, we would be looking at $2.65 per $1,000 of assessed value with the supplemental levy. So remember, we're at $1.49. This would increase the supplemental levy would increase that by $1.16, and that would result in $2.65. So if you have a $100,000 home, your annual cost would be $116, which means about $9.67 a month. $9.67 to offer kids what they need to be successful in life. Based upon a $200,000 home, we would be looking at an annual, once again, it would be an additional $1.16 per $1,000 of assessed value. The annual cost would be $138, and for a $200,000 home, the monthly cost would be $19.33, and that's in addition to the amount currently being levied. Okay, so let's look at other Idaho districts. Who's paying what? If you look at the top of the line in North Idaho, not the top of the line school district, the top of the line of what's being paid, Kendrick pays $8.64 per $1,000 of assessed value. Our district, Plummer Worley, which has all the same needs that Kendrick has, is paying $1.49, and that is second to the bottom. So we aren't, we haven't gone out to our community for this before. So what if it fails? Let's talk about that. We've already cut our programs and services to the bone. Students don't have music and art this year. We don't have a comprehensive educational program for our students. So if the levy fails, proportional reductions would have to be taken across all areas, and this is what the board determined in the last school district meeting. So that would mean kindergarten would go to half day. We would have to do more staffing reductions across the board, program reductions, athletic reductions, school activities, and other. Other possibilities that we might need to do is a 4-day school week, furloughing staff days, and more online classes. So how would this affect you? If we have a half-day kindergarten, 4-day work week, and we furlough days, childcare costs will increase, particularly, obviously, the younger the child is. And this would be quite a dramatic increase. If we have fewer programs, it's going to be harder for students to graduate with what they need. If we have fewer qualified teachers, it'll be harder for students to get the help that they need to be successful. If we have less supervision and large class sizes, because we have fewer staff, we'll have more bullying. If we have more online classes, we'll have less personalization of instruction. If we have fewer athletics and student activities, we'll have less student and community engagement. If we have all of the above, all the things that I just mentioned, despite all this great progress that our teachers and our students have been making over the last several years, we have a fear that we're kind of at a breaking point here. We're at a tipping point, and we fear that our progress may decline with larger class sizes and fewer things for students to do. So, don't forget, please register to vote, check your polling place location, and request an absentee ballot. Well, I guess this is, request an absentee ballot by May 9th by mail or May 15th, and you can do that in person at the county. So I'm Judy Sherritt. If you have any questions, please call the district office at 686-1621. I hope to hear from you. I will also be downloading you can come and if you can make one of the presentations, I would really appreciate that. Thank you very much for listening and watching.